All right. Good morning. Thank you for showing up at 9 o'clock. Is that what it is? Boy, I know. At Microsoft, that's kind of touch and go for a meeting, whether you get people to show up. 10 o'clock's reliable, but I'm happy. I'll take it for the team, do the 9 o'clock slot. No, it's great. Great that folks are here. Probably means you didn't go to the party, I suppose, right? Because you'd be up too late. No, okay. Wrong. I would like to learn a little bit about you, because one of the things that we came into as we were talking about, well, these sessions in particular where we're talking about the HTML platform of Windows 8 is, well, is that new to people? Is that really familiar to people? So I guess really how many folks here would be considered experienced web developers client side? So it's HTML, JavaScript, CSS, super. So how many are either maybe server side, that could be ASP.NET, maybe it's Silverlight client and not so much. Okay, we got kind of a mix. Is there folks new to the whole thing out there? Just kind of, okay. Well, I know ASP.NET on the server. I don't know Silverlight on the client very much, so I can't help you there. I know the client side of what we'll talk about here quite a lot, so I think that'll work. Mostly what this is a deep dive on the building block features that make a lot of the stuff you may have seen demoed at a higher level. If you went to the controls talk yesterday for the new Metro controls, they're built on foundational pieces that we'll see in this presentation and a follow-up presentation at 1 o'clock today on the new layout features. So, which is all to say, okay, there's a lot of high-level stuff you've seen. You can also build it down at the metal, such as HTML and JavaScript is the metal, but that's good. So about myself, I'm on the Internet Explorer team, but we power the web platform of Windows 8. And in that regard, we do these features for all the stuff you're seeing. With IE9, it's fun to reflect on what is today. It's the 15th. It was 1 year ago today we did the IE9 beta launch in San Francisco. And at that time, we introduced this idea of beauty of the web. And then we talked about, well, beautiful web. And we've evolved over, I guess, this last year to really wanting to talk about that as beautiful apps, whether they're Metro-style apps on Windows 8, or in fact, beautiful apps in the context of a browser on the desktop. So that's been this evolution of the last year. There's a ton of work that was in IE9 that carries forward, of course, into 10 and into Windows 8. So what are we going to talk about today? I'm going to really talk about the graphics platform of the Windows 8 web platform, the graphics of the Windows 8 web platform. That's, of course, in Metro-style apps and Internet Explorer 10. So folks building for the web, this also applies to you. And then we're really going to go into hands-on features. And we're going to go through a series of demos down at the actual property values of most of the features that build these up. And we'll do that pretty loose. So you've been in some demos this week that have been nice and polished and well-rehearsed. This won't be one of those. So we'll try to work this together. You may want to call out a feature we could try to make happen here. Let's see if that works. Well, putting everything in context, you've seen this chart before where we've got different ways to code Metro-style apps, different ways to code desktop apps. Of course, we're focused on those pieces right there in green and blue, the HTML and CSS and JavaScript, whether that's in the browser on the desktop, or whether it's in the browser in the Metro-style browser, or whether it's in a Metro-style app coded with these technologies. So again, what we're talking about here applies. Everything applies equally to those two areas. In fact, just about every feature I'm going to show you here today also works in other browsers. Sometimes not as well. I don't want to dwell on that. Some features aren't quite there, but generally, we are still committed to the same markup approach to the standards-based web as we were with IE9. So with that, let's just start looking at features. So, CSS3 is this big surface area of features. We're going to focus here on the graphical set, and as I mentioned, there's a session later on some of the layout type features. So these are all what I'd call sort of basic graphics effects of CSS. You know, HTML is, at its root, I think, text, boxes, images, and that's about it. You can apply color to them. Okay, that's good. So where did things happen? And that was really kind of where the HTML4 world, the CSS2 world, flat color, square corner rectangles. So where did we go? We added transparency with CSS3. Round corners started coming in. Shadows on the box elements, shadows on text itself. Richer backgrounds. You could do image backgrounds, and if people go in Photoshop, make great looking things, throw them on the background. But now you can programmatically do gradients, linear, radial, and some effects that are not entirely obvious just by their name. And typography made a big change recently. There have been for many years, this kind of war. We talk about the browser war. There's sort of a battle around fonts about what format would the different browsers support. And it was about a little over a year, maybe a year and a half ago or so, people started rallying around this web open font format. It looked like one that all the browser vendors could support, and that's good news, because fonts, whether it's the creator of the fonts putting them into a format, or the website operator or designer wanting to license those fonts for use, you don't want to do it in multiple formats and deal with different browsers. Browser differences have always been a problem. Typography has moved a long way forward now that we have a common open font format we can standardize on. We'll look at that just briefly. So, well, with that, let's go into some demos here. They're all live on our IE test drive site right now. Let's see, go right there. So this is linked off of one of the tiles on the home page of the test drive site is this whole collection of hands-on features. And let's go through some of these. Well, I'm going to start with text shadow. Text shadow is one of the straightforward feature, it's shadows on text. Well, it's new in IE10. It's a really highly requested feature. For people in the audience who have been frustrated we didn't have it, let's just get off and do it. So, okay, these are the properties of text shadow. You've got horizontal, vertical offsets. You have a blur radius, a spread distance. If you look in the markup area, pretty much this column matches exactly the arguments right down here. So let's just play with some. I can do, okay, horizontal offset. I'm just going to darken that up a little bit, make sure that we can read that. You got a vertical. Now, blur is, of course, when things start to get a little fun. Spread lets you actually make that a little bigger. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. And, of course, the color of the shadow can be, well, anything one would like. And you get too much blur, things kind of get faded out. You get dark shadows. Things can go on top. They can go on the back. In fact, playing with that spread distance, you learn that shadow is a little bit of a misnomer. You can make a glow by playing with the blur. You can make kind of a really strong glow. Let's go get the text color just down here is white and start to create effects that, well, sort of aren't at all shadowy. So we got some, I don't know, bluish glow. And you can do other things. In fact, And you can put these, of course, against different backgrounds. You do that. These are particularly vivid colors. Let's actually get one that's kind of a vivid color. And what do we want to be seeing for our, it's really easy to make some ugly stuff. So if we said beautiful in the title, okay, beautiful is one option, ugly and really crazy is another option. There are samples out there on the web, different things. I borrowed a few from a website I like. Things you can do that aren't exactly text shadow looking, sort of an engraved look, maybe in a different engraved on a black look, subtle glowing, maybe something that looks a little more blurry. As you get that change of the color in the background color to the text color can look like it. A feature that was sort of called mysterious on the website. Not sure how mysterious it is, but you put different types of backgrounds, and it's a different kind of feel to a look. again, a milky look when you get this text is the same color as the background. You even take the blur radius down, you start to get all sorts of different effects beyond just pure shadows. People seem to love doing things that look kind of strange, like fire. Which, let me just use this to illustrate. All these controls on the site let you control one text shadow, but the spec says you can link them up. So if you check the markup down here, there's 1 shadow, 2 shadow, 3 shadow, 4 shadow, 5 shadow, slightly different colors, slightly different offsets, and you can create an effect like this. In fact, just recently, someone on the IE blog asked, will IE10 be able to do the new Twitter glow that they're working on? I've put it on black here. Twitter does it on actually a light blue background. But it's a very subtle blue, almost too subtle to see. But of course, we can always, actually I can't beef it up. It's a multi piece shadow glow again. You can always go a little crazier with this whole multiple thing and create something that's sort of very differently, again, block. These are, again, multiple shadows. The markup's not matching the effect right here. I'm sorry. They're basically 1 pixel off shadows for however many you want. I think this is probably 12 or so of them. And anytime I touch something about the shadow, it's going to lose that effect in this particular demo. But you can play with some things in the demo. Of course, this is just to get a sense. What you really want to do is use this to inspire what you want to do and learn and play with it. So text shadow is one of the straightforward ones. I wanted to start there because it's a new feature and a highly requested feature in IE10 and Windows 8 web platform. So let's go back. I want to talk about transparency a little bit. This is something new in IE10. Again, I mentioned HTML5 CSS3 was a kind of a flat world. Kind of like that new Metro look, it's like what was old is new again. But for a moment, let's pretend we actually want transparency. You've seen this always, in Photoshop, it's easy to do. But there's and something I want to bring up here. Let me get the border thrown in. There's a couple features creating this demo that it really came home to me, what's going on. Borders are actually drawn on top of the background by default. So if your background, I'm going to change color model here just for a minute so I can actually pick it. If your background is a yellowish, even if your border is black, you start adding transparency, you're fading out, not against the underlying page, but against the background color. But there's a property you can control that. Background clip actually lets you say whether I want to clip to the padding box. You look in the markup area. So I'm clipping here to the border box. That's the default. You can clip to the padding box. So now this border is going against the background checkerboard I have here because we're showing off transparency. Or you can even have it be the content box, so padding not in there. And when you would, this demo doesn't exactly lend it to that feature, but if you just want to get the background color on the content, not the padding and not under the border. Oh, thank you. It's always a good reminder here. We brought the power plug. Need to plug it in. Thank you, Windows 8, for letting me know. So background clip, something I hadn't actually thought of until I started playing with transparent borders. Of course, you can get a white background, text transparency. That's pretty natural. So you can do all these things with either an RGBA function, an HSL or HSLA function. It's sort of funny. If you're doing color pickers, I certainly like color pickers. It sort of work in a hue, saturation, lightness space. If I'm just typing them in, it just sort of doesn't matter. But what I want to say is compare this a little bit to opacity. There's another property in CSS3 around transparency, and it's called opacity. That takes the entire element and fades it out. So we've got 1 now, and I'm going to take it out. So this takes everything out together. And in fact, the spec it's not just the element, it's the element and its entire child tree. So if you have something on a page and you want to fade it out, opacity is the way to do it. If you just have text and you want that text to be semi-transparent, use RGBA or HSLA. And it's actually faster in IE9. The implementation of an alpha color is faster than opacity. And a lot of it has to do with how the spec says it has to be stacked and composited with the rest of the page. So if you're just taking a flat color and taking it down, try to use the RGBA and save opacity really to change the transparency of a whole collection of objects, the whole object tree. So that's a way to go there. Well, let's go on from that. I'm going to really quickly, border radius. Again, it's so sad. We worked on these features really hard in IE9, and now I don't even see them in the old Metro. But it's a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun showing off wide borders, fun patterns, dotteds and dashes, how they play. And most of their demos we've done are this, but again, this spec is more than just a simple radius. The spec lets you take on an independent radius for every corner. In fact, it lets you have different X and Y radii. If you get them too far apart, I'm going to go solid here for a moment. Or none's actually a good way too. Again, we call it border radius, but there doesn't have to be a border. And it's just going to shadow or it's going to round the background color. Clip any content, any text in there, any background image. If you apply this to an image or a video element, you'll clip that and put that into a shape. So again, it's where the name isn't everything you can do with it. So you can create some looks, of what you want. You can go through and actually make a shape that, okay, you might actually use that shape for something on a website. I think I've seen things like that for logos, and you might throw an image in it. You might change the background color and have it be a whole different kind of look right there. So move out of there. Let's go to gradients for a moment. This is another one where the name is simple. Okay, it's a fade from one color to another. Because we want to do simple color control here. We can go from lime to white. We can go lime to transparent. That's another place where transparency comes in. You can go fade to whatever's under you. If your background, well, you get the idea. Whatever the background is, you're fading out to that. A linear, again, you can go the top down. You can go from any edge, from any corner, the bottom. So this is, if you're really following the specs these days, you'll know this is one changing. The implementation here matches a February spec. By the time we get around to beta, you may find this changes to match a current working draft. But all the browsers agree on this model right now. I say that, and this markup, the -ms linear gradient, because this is an in-progress feature. I think it's the first one I may have shown that has a vendor prefix. So this is still in flux, if you will, in terms of the spec of the W3C. But this is the syntax that is solid right now, interoperable across browsers, though every browser is doing it with a vendor-specific prefix. So let's just look at that. And I bring that up because the current spec says this direction property, it is the first argument to the linear gradient function, is the corner of the start color. Now it's a subtle change, but the new spec is going to change it to be the corner or the edge of the destination color. They're going to add the word to in front of this, so it'll say to bottom right, and go the other way. And I don't know why we're making that change, but that's it's a working group process. It's a collective thing. There's some value that somewhere I have to believe. So I want to talk about that. You can obviously get the gradients going any direction you want. You can actually take a custom angle. I'm going to get a little different look here for a moment. You can take an angle and take that all the way around. Now, again, we've been doing it from one color to another color. You can put more color stops in there. We can go, so we're going now from lime to black to silver. Okay, that's maybe just a little too ugly. What if we went from silver to black to hello? White's in there somewhere. You can start to see that. I'm going to go back to something I can recognize for an angle. So we're going left with our, oh, there we go. Now, where that stop is at, it can be in the middle, it can be very close to an edge, so you're controlling when things happen. Now, this is where you can sit here and play with this. You can add any number of stops, make them different colors, different alpha values, and create some really cool stuff. One thing that wasn't clear, again, to me, is if you take two stops, we got our middle stop, and it's, oh, I'm sorry. Got to play with our controls. And if you get their stop really close, in fact, you can, I'm going to add one more stop in here. And I want to get that to match the white. Actually, let me not make them white so we can see something against the background. You can create hard edges by changing the point at which they join. So we can get in here and create a stripe effect if we get them all right and lined up and the right colors. So you can have a gradient, hard edge, go back. So there's a lot you can do to throw this one definition of a gradient with multiple stops on your background. So some fun things there. Well, the last thing in sort of the basic graphics category is typography. And I mentioned earlier about, hey, we've come to an agreement about a common format we can all support, which means this demo will work in most browsers. Okay, and you probably all had this situation. A designer comps up a page, maybe we're doing a new blog, kind of a newsletter-y look one. We've got side heads, we've got inline heads, and they spec it up, and they're doing all the great stuff that designers do. They give it to you, and you put it together, you do your best markup you can do, and you give it to them, and they say, well, it's all wrong. Well, what do you mean it's all wrong? Well, the fonts are all wrong. I said, what do you mean? I'm using web-safe fonts. I mean, I can't use the fonts you use that came with Adobe Creative Studio or whatever, Creative Suite. Well, WAF can change that. You can license fonts. You can find free fonts on the web and go give them the fonts they wanted. And now your designer can be super happy. And I'm making light of this in the sense that it was just some kind of designer lightness that they chose this, but it's not really. Fonts are very much your identity signature. This whole Metro look has a signature font, the Sego UI font in different weights, from light to semi-bold to black. There's a whole collection of weights in this signature look for the Metro, or the Metro style apps and Metro style user interface. And your website or your company or your clients may have their own identity. Web fonts allow you to express that. There are many sources of this. Some sell you fonts one-off. Again, free fonts that can be downloaded. There are services, really interesting, fonts.com. You can sign up as a monthly subscription and you have access to their entire library of 10,000 fonts if you want. Again, you can use all kinds of fonts across your site. You pay a flat monthly fee for that. Again, we're talking about professional sites that really care, and the license fees are not high on these things. So. All right, well, with that, let's leave let me double check our box on the bottom. Let's go back. So that's, again, what I've kind of called the basic CSS3 graphics features that help you bring more life, more depth, certainly with the shadows, than you were able to back in HTML4 and CSS2, or really the web of only about a year ago. So well, let's move on. Another feature, now we're getting beyond just changing the attributes of the elements, but really changing their position, and in the case of rotate and scale, all kinds of things. So 2D and 3D transforms let you apply display time transformations. And I want to explain this. You know that CSS, in the flow model, you put an object, you put text, and stuff flows around it, and if your image is there. Now you can go apply a transform to that image, and it does not relay out the text. It's not like moving the image. It's like display time putting it somewhere else. If If you're into CSS positioning, it's like you're doing a position relative on something, and for a translate, moving it just relative to where it was laid out. You're not changing the laid out location. So that's an important thing here, because if I'm right, XAML has two transformations, a display time and a layout time transformation, and that's not currently in the proposal for HTML. It's a display time transformation only. Well, there's two kinds, say in the title. The 2D transforms, pretty straightforward: translate, scale, rotate, and skew. And 3D transform, which is, again, it's translate, scale, rotate, skew in 3 dimensions. That, and we'll see that in a moment. And perspective. Perspective is the one that, for all the tricks and work, I just could never figure out how to do without this built in. So that's a fun one to play with, certainly. So let's just go into a hands-on on that. So it's in the same site, some links at the bottom. Let's go to 2D. Again, that's pretty straightforward. You can just display time transform something. So, well, okay, simplest one here, I can go translate. Great, X and Y, that's pretty straightforward. You can rotate that down there and then scale it up or down. Now, of course, if you played with transforms, you're aware of this. If you're not, this is a new thing. Of course, order of these matters. So I've got these little extra controls here to change the order. Let me first rotate. And wow, that looks kind of different. So what actually happened? Well, once I rotate up here, subsequent operations are also rotated. So I rotate, that's the little one light box up and then when I'm translating along it, so it's really weird. So I've rotated now X. Let me actually get Y back to 0, a little easier to see. Okay, sorry, that was funny. So the X has now been rotated. So X comes along, and Y is, of course, off of that position. You're doing both together. You can scale. Now and scaling happens there. And you can keep chaining these things together. So we could add another rotate in here. Maybe for some reason I'll move the rotate up. Before that, I can rotate it back. And I've done this. Now, obviously, you can achieve the same things by figuring out the math. But again, in a real world, you may have had an effect where you were rotated, translated, and then you need to kind of further rotate that maybe for an effect or scale it up. So again, you can chain these on. We can get some things out of here. Maybe we don't want that translate. We're just taking a look at what we can do. Maybe I want to see what happens if I think if I translate, I'm just going to do an individual X translate. A translate after a scale is happening in scaled space, if I'm right. So the 200 pixels I'm moving, are they or are they not? Yeah, they're actually scaled as well. So if it's not, now you're in a world where I say I'm moving 187 pixels, but I'm not really moving 187 pixels. I'm moving 187 times 1.55 in this particular world. So again, transformation math is crazy. There is somewhere a way to set the matrix straight. If you know this stuff, you can set the display matrix POW and drop it in there. Well, I think I was just accidentally hitting something that is sort of worth showing off. One you can, of course, rotate all the way around. So let me just get that out of there. There was a scale. So this is scaling X and Y together. Let me get rid of that too. You can also scale independently in X or Y. And it's strange if you do a negative scale, it's like flipping it around. So it's kind of an interesting effect you can get. Now you can get something upside down, backwards. Now okay, so upside down and backwards. Okay, one thing I've not looked at in this demo yet, come on, little mousey, are these two controls up top. So what are they about? Transform origin. Okay, scale, you've seen. It's super clear with rotate. Let me get rid of the scale. We're going to look at rotate. I rotate, it's around the center. Oh, it's not really, it's around this transform origin. So if I want to set the origin to 0, 0 or left and top, I can transform around that location, transform, of course, and then I can, of course, do it everywhere. It's kind of fun if you get the vertical, and then we go get a, say, rotate in the, help me out. Oh, we got to rotate. Oh, that's rotate. Scale in the Y, help me. Scale in the Y, and boom. And you can almost kind of make it look like it's fallen away. It's not really fallen away. You know that. But you can kind of squish it down, and that's, of course, again, relative to the point that was here. So you start putting these things together, and you do them as effects, and maybe you do them as part of your UI. You can emphasize things in a different way. Well, that really starts being fun when you get over to 3D transforms. I mentioned perspective is kind of the most fun. So you give it a depth, and so I start off and I'm playing with this thing, and I go, oh, that's not doing anything. I really expected some kind of stuff, and then it clicked. You have to rotate something before perspective takes effect. So you play that. And now again, now I've got to rotate Y here. So I'm rotating around the vertical axis or the Y-axis. Let's get rid of that. Let me get a rotate X in there. Hello. Please send feedback if you don't like these new pop-ups. Sorry. And you can rotate there, and that's kind of a fun effect. And again, we were looking before, what if I drop it to the bottom and boom, drop our door kind of down. So a lot you can do, and you start putting these things together. Perspective, it's fun to play with as a beginning point. You get in here and you go, okay, translate things. You kind of got this issue again. I translate in Z. Well, it's coming closer to you, but you don't see anything because until you rotate it and you get that rotation above it, there isn't any Z to play with. And you've got to get in there and get a rotate. Hello, rotate Y first. And now you get in here and you go, boy, can you just actually visualize what's going on? So I can't. What do I got? I got too much rotation. And now that's my Z pulling it forward and back. So you play with this stuff, you start to figure out what is the effect I'm looking for, capture the markup and go. Again, this is another one of these features, 2D transform, and we talked about gradients, actually 2D transforms, 3D transforms. These are all in a stage of specification. It's not yet finalized. This behavior is actually pretty interoperable between browsers. We're converging on a specification that can move forward. But at the moment, these are all vendor prefix. Now, you can run these. All these test drives work in the competing browsers. You can go in there and you'll see that if you're in Firefox, it'll be a -MOZ, Mozilla. Actually, 3D might not work in Firefox, but in Chrome, for example, -WebKit in front of all of these. So you can start to see that. You can also see that if you're going to program this in a production website, you're going to be doing a lot of markup with vendor prefixes in it. And there's some techniques in JavaScript, so you can go find out which one you should use and then just apply it that way. But you got some work. Of course, if you're in Metro Style Apps, you don't have that problem. You just use the -MS. As far as last I heard, Metro Style Apps won't be showing up in other platforms, so go that way. Okay, so that's 2D and 3D transforms. I want to get back. Now I've mentioned using these in interactivity is a lot of fun. And it's the CSS transitions and animation very simply through markup. So I'm going to just talk about these. Transitions, they're really an implied animation. So in CSS, you can set properties. That's what we've been setting in our little markup block. You have a shape. You change its color even. And if you have a transition set for color, it'll just smoothly change that over a period of time you specify. Animations are more complicated. You have to set up the sequence of values and properties that you want to transition, but it also lets you do fun effects like bounces. It lets you go, start off taking something smaller and then taking it to the side. You can build those things with animations that you can't build with simple transitions. Yet, simple transitions are super valuable if you just want to provide some user feedback. So, and they can all be used with the pseudo classes of hover. So you can hover over an element, have it apply new properties. If those properties are being transitioned, it'll smoothly go to those new properties, create some fun effects, and we'll have a little demo of that in a moment. So let's get hands-on with these things. So transitions, and I preset this up. So let's just talk about the parameters we've got. We've got we start off with a delay. How long until after the value is changed do you start changing it? Which, okay. But more important is the duration. How long until you've triggered it does it run? How long does it take to change from the old to the new value? There's a timing function. We're going to come back to that in a moment. Actually, the default is ease. That's why I bring it up here. But a more common is just linear. So it's just going to change a value over time. And then transition property, what am I changing? So here, I'm actually not using a transform as we looked. I'm just using the properties of top and left. And let me just go play off in the beginning. That was just changing the little delta from where it was. So again, that's over the 2 seconds, changing those two properties. And we'll go faster. And if it was 1, so you can kind of see what's happening. So let me just go through another couple things in here. We talked about opacity earlier. You want to fade something out. Well, I want to fade it out, but I want to fade it out smoothly. Not have it disappear, but just automatically. In fact, let's just get these so they're not even moving. And just fading something out. You say how long right here. And again, if we wanted, we could even, from the moment you trigger it, you may even want to have a little delay. They're looking at it for, I guess in this case, 0.7 of a second we set, and then it fades out. So again, a lot of stuff you can do. Let's go pick up, we did talk about, you could put a rotate in here. We could rotate on, okay, I don't really want it not visible. Bring that in. So again, changing that rotation. Now and as we were just looking, you should, somewhere in your markup, probably go set a transform origin where you want it. I don't think it makes sense to transition transform origin, though it might in fact do that and move this slowly to a different place. It's actually, I wrote these hands-on demos. My team did these features. And you're trying to learn them because there's so many combinations as you see. So we create these. We're learning things all the time. We'll learn things here today. As I just think of, I should have put transform origin in here because I don't know if that actually transitions a change. But that aside, I'm going to get rid of all these right now because I do want to go throw, thank you. You delete them, they transition away. I do want to go put a rotate in here, and let's go bring it up. I'm just going to whip this right over to just about 90. We'll do that. Now, so there's a timing function. Okay, that's going to drive us crazy. We'll get to 90. And let's do it faster. And let's not have any delay. Okay. I want to talk about timing function for a minute. We're looking at linear here. There's a set of built-in ones that create an effect. Ease starts quick, ends slowly. Linear we looked at. But if you're also looking at the little curve under there, you can see what's going on. Ease, do it. Starts rather quickly, basically goes linear. Ease out, smooths there. But the named ones are fun. Let's just create some. You can create some that start really slowly and end really fast. And you can almost, boom, maybe that's tipping over. It hits a point and it just falls over on us. So playing with the timing functions gives you another degree of personality. In fact, there's a Metro-style timing function, which isn't any of the built-in ones in the CSS spec. And I should have a little magic button that gave me the Metro-style timing function. Internally, it's called part of the Windows personality. But it's, again, because of the control you can have, your designers, your interaction folks can really tune what they think is the right look for something. And maybe rotation is kind of the crazy one to do it with, but maybe bringing something a little bit bigger when someone hovers over it is an effect they might actually use. So, and the timing of that, they can control that. We hope that all these are pretty smooth. Our implementation, as everything, is hardware accelerated, so this is pretty smooth rendering of everything we've got. We hope that's the case, and we're going to get there. Okay, let's step up to animations, which is either you can view transitions as kind of simplified animations or animations as transitions on steroids. I think the reality is transitions are simplified animations, but because this has its root somewhere back in SVG animation. So this is a tougher game, and I actually didn't bring it up with any kind of presets. So, but it's a keyframe model. So I'm going to scroll up here so we can look at the markup. There's really two sets of markup. There's the markup on the element you're going to apply it to, and then there's the definition of the keyframes themselves. And the keyframes they have a from and a to, not unlike gradients to some degree, and they have any number of intermediate steps. I've just pre-initialized this with 1 at 50%. So let's see what we can create here. We were doing that little scale earlier. I'm going to go and let's grab that same scale. So we're going to bring it in and we bring it up. And then it goes down. And you're going to, okay, so in our keyframes definition, we're starting at scale 1, or no scale. We're bringing it up to 1.5 and back down to 1. So as that animation plays, we're kind of going through that cycle. And again, you could do that. Let's just add a keyframe. Let's add a keyframe at about 69, which is maybe it's a little less than 1. So we're going to so we come up, we go under, maybe actually decide this probably should be a little less. We should have more spaced out. And, we could play all day to find out what's a good feel for this animation. And we got to just make it a little less useful here. Boom, pop it back in. So there's a lot you can do. Now, here's one thing. Let's say the end of this thing was, I was going down to 0.7. Let's just go way up to 2 at the end. Boom. And when the animation finished, it just popped back. So if we think back, transition was triggered when your code changed the value. So when it got to the end of the transition, that new value was there. It's actually not the case with animation. With animation, it's triggered. So you have this definition. I got to just scroll the markup so we had it here. That very bottom parameter, the MS Animation name demo, it's when you set that property, triggers the animation. So your animation definition is sitting there, your elements have all their current properties. It's when you set that property that you trigger the animation. Now, there's a couple, if you wanted it to stick, okay, there's this property called animation fill mode. And the most useful, I won't say it's the most useful, but one of them is not backwards, I'm sorry, forwards. Which means going forward in time after the end, hold the last value. So you apply the animation. In this case, we've got an animation that is taking the scale to 2, and at the end of that, we're holding that into the future. There's another way you could do that. In fact, there are a number of things. Animation, again, unlike, or it's richer than transitions, and it has an object model. So let's just say I put that back to none. So boom, it's just going to pop back to the default. I've written a little handler. I don't have the markup here, but Animations fire events, so there's an animation end event. You can take the animation end event and set it to anything you want. In this case, all that code does is sets it to that final value. So it simulates what the fill mode forward does. But the benefit of that, this is another crazy, okay, so this is crazy stuff, and I'm just going that way. I think it'd be it's hard to use until you really get it, and then all of a sudden you love it for the power. If you don't set that value there, it's actually not set on the object. So then some subsequent code asks what the value is. It doesn't come back and say, oh, I'm scale 2. Or at least it doesn't if you ask on the element.style.transform, it doesn't come back scale 2. What's interesting, if you use getComputedStyle, people know about getComputedStyle, window.getComputedStyle, you give it an element object, it gives you the computed style for that element. Not what is set on it, but what is computed by the environment. You will get the proper value back for an animation. During the animation, you'll get the proper value, and at the end for the forward property. So there's some, I'm going to change that just so we don't clutter our screen too much. Now there's one more, I should do it. We're not doing this a lot. I'm not doing a lot of delays here because it just slows everything down. But we could have a delay start of 1.9 before we get going. And maybe our initial value here was 0.5. So okay, let's try that again. After 1.9 seconds, it popped down and it came up. Ooh, kind of weird. That's what this backwards setting is. At the start of the animation, at the time you apply the animation name, backwards means basically it means from 0 to the end of the delay time, give me the value of set the value to the from property. So now why you might do this, you may have elements that are just transitioned on load. Your whole markup just does this. You may have a delay. You don't kick it off maybe till 5 seconds into your page, 2 seconds into your page, but you don't want it to be all bouncy around. Well, you can almost sort of ignore the markup on the element, put all the markup in the keyframe, set the property for fill mode to be, well, backwards, forwards. Actually, you probably want to do both. So it starts there and it stays there. And then you can really you can set up all these elements in your static markup, page loads or app loads, and it does it and it's all sitting there. You don't have to go sit and grab events. So grabbing events, that's a possible thing. And there's events at every keyframe transition you can pick up, and you can just set timer events or the request animation frame events and check the value with getComputedStyle as it's moving. Okay, so we have played with scale in here. I'm going to delete those guys, delete the properties, and let me, what do I have in here? I think color. I didn't show transitioning color on the other demo, so let's, black, oh, not color. I don't want color, I'm sorry. I want background color because it's more obvious here. So we're starting off a background color of, oh sure, maroon to yellow to, red to white. How about that? So we still got our keyframes. Okay, white's maybe not the way to end it here, huh? Oh, fuchsia. And that's almost worth just leaving it up here with a long run. What's interesting is when you look at some of these complex data types like color, color is animated and transitions. Gradients are animated and transitions. So you can, I don't have an example here. Shadows are animated and transitions. So even these more complex CSS properties can be animated and transitioned, and it's basically compare the old to the new, and the values that get changed not linearly, we talked about, but with a timing function that you can change. And you can do a timing function for each keyframe if you want a different custom timing. And frankly, I haven't played with this enough to figure out the different effects you can create. But each keyframe can have a different timing function for how it goes to the next frame. So again, what you can create with this stuff, well, I'm looking forward to seeing that because I don't have that visualized right now. Okay. I think between 2D and 3D transforms, transition, and animations, there's this huge toolkit of stuff to create some really interesting interactive sites, and I look forward to see what you guys will do. So we did that demo. Multi-column layout, real quick. This is a commercial, actually, for the 1 o'clock session that Christian Stockwell is going to give. You can take any element, any div, any paragraph. You can make it multi-column. I'm going to go here. Make it multi-column. And it's super simple. So I've got this thing in here. It's actually a bit of text from the multi-column spec. And it's literally just a div with the text dropped into it. I can go say, I'm going to make it 2 columns. And it just does that. And it makes it 3 columns, and it can go 4 columns. And you can even see, if you notice, the height of the box is changing slightly as lines go. That's because I have height auto here. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. Well, so maybe I'm going to go a little crazy. You get 4 columns in here, and you start to see an awful lot of ragged edges here, and if that's on Justified. And if you did it with Justified, you've kind of got a lot of white space in between these things, and you really would like to see hyphenation. So you turn on hyphenation, and you get automatic hyphenation of the words coming out of the same dictionaries that are shared now across Windows 8. They're the dictionaries that have been used in Microsoft Office products for a long time. You get that. Well, I'm pointing right here to something that if you're really into typography and look, you kind of don't like. Maybe you don't like 3 lines with consecutive hyphens. In fact, you may say, I never even want 2 in a row, so my line limit is 1. I'll let 1 be, or maybe I will let 2 happen, but I got 3. Oh, that's because multi-column itself is hyphenated. What a bummer. Okay, I got that set here. Let me go back to no limit. Right over here, actually, this is, again, that multi-col, okay. So right here we got 5 in a row, and that goes, that's not so great looking. We're going to go drop it. I'll let 3 in a row here, and maybe you even say, well, 3 in a row is okay, but this between, I don't like the 2-letter thing. So I want there at least to be 3 characters on each side of the hyphen. So there's quite a bit of control hiding in here to create some very great looking text. And as you start building Metro-style apps for reading experiences, consumptive experiences, that could be news, that could be W3C specs for that matter. Let's get the W3C spec viewer app done by tomorrow. I'll start using it. It'll be a great one. You want this kind of control because this all adds to readability. Much more on this at 1 o'clock today when Christian Stockwell goes into not just multi-column, but a whole collection of layout features around grid, flexbox, regions, and position floats to let you really create some super looking stuff. So let me get back here. Okay, I want to talk just briefly about SVG. People know SVG, scalable vector graphics. I mean, we had VML before in IE. The rest of the world had SVG. Of course, XAML has a full set of vector graphics. Let's just go there. We've added filter effects. This is new to 10, something that wasn't in 9, and we're really excited about it because of the hardware-accelerated implementation. So the performance is just amazing on filter effects. I want to flip. Actually, here, let me do this for a moment. Again, these have all been in IE9. Let me just go, just for SVG quick, if you haven't seen it, you can do a lot of stuff. The key thing, of course, is the whole scalability. So it's the quality that you get as you scale around, nothing new. That's of text. Let's just go get something. This happens to be diagrams off the web. You can scale them in. Again, of course, the quality is maintained. This is IE9, but the quality that you get way different than if this had been an image, just a regular PNG image, for example, and scaling it up, you're not going to get the detail. You're going to get great, big, blurry bits. Okay, let's get back to filter effects, because that, if you didn't know SVG, this is great. Okay, filter effect. We're going to start off with a little picture. What can we do to it? Well, we can blur it. That's kind of fun. I'm just going to try to do these one at a time, actually. What is erode? Erode kind of makes the dark areas bigger. Boom. There's a filter that we've got. Dilate. Some of these have more parameters than we're controlling in this demo. It kind of makes some fun effects. In fact, they apply. Here we're doing it to an image element inside of SVG. They can also apply to text elements, so we can go and, well, again, we could blur it. That's kind of fun. But we can, what else is there? We've seen shadow. We were looking at shadow earlier in text, but I don't have all the control here for color. Now, this is interesting. I want to show this. This is where the implementations converge. Our text shadow implementation and SVG filter effects are the same underlying graphics pipe. They're the new Direct 2D image effects engine. There's a session on that sometime. Coming up, I think, in the next couple days. So we're, again, building on that strong platform of Windows 8 to deliver these capabilities. Got a lot of fun sort of examples pre-done here. A lot of crazy stuff you can do. There was some demo lighting effects. This is a demo that was done for a conference called SVG Open. It was fun. It was done for a different browser. Fire. We saw fire as a fun little text effect. Well, here, if you go take it and you take request animation frame and change the values, you can actually create some good burning stuff. And burning seems to be a theme. So we did a little demo where can we just go take fire? Can we burn into a bank vault right here? So you can do this. It's fun. It runs. The real reason this is timed, if you do this on Windows 8, i.e. 10, you're going to get a good time. I won't do it right now on stage. I'm not supposed to do this. Go try it in Chrome and see if the cops catch you before you get in the vault. So that's the thing there. I'm going to go back. So one last thing. We wanted to talk about Canvas briefly. Really, the best thing on Canvas is, if you don't know about it, it's an API. It's a drawing API on a bitmap. It's really, it's like GDI or system.drawing.2D, to a bitmap DC. You can draw it back to the screen. It's got a pretty rich model, all these things. It, of course, is hardware accelerated, makes it perform quite well. Again, we've got on our demo site here an adaptation of a demo we had out. It's again on the IE Test Drive site, hands-on. Well, here's hands-on Canvas. It was Canvas Pad out there. Actually lets you go in and edit stuff. We can go, or pink, or pink if I find my keys. Execute the code, and you can just change it. It's dynamic. You can play with it. A lot of examples. Again, if you run it in a loop, you can go and do stuff, arcs, curves. So this is just kind of showing off the capabilities and doing them all in a way that you can go edit. Again, it's got a transformation model. Happens to be based on radians, so you're going to get your brain around that, but otherwise. And the fun part of Canvas is you can go take frames out of a video element and draw them on a canvas. And this is just doing exactly that, just taking the frame. But you can go in there and play with it. Maybe you draw stuff on it, maybe you screw around with the colors, maybe you transform it, rotate it. So a lot you can do with Canvas. Really, that's worthy of a whole separate session. There's a session online about SVG and Canvas if you'd like to go deeper. So to finish up, let's sort of put it together. So we've looked at a lot of building block features. How might one put it together in a demo? We did this demo. I did this demo earlier for IE9 that we called, what do we call it? Flickr postcards. And we put it together now. I'm going to go to a different page here just so I don't have the video running in the background. And we've adapted that to totally use CSS transitions and animations So when I click them, and a few gratuitous effects like the glow with the box color, the glow on the title. We'll be using WAF fonts. These are a free font from Squirrel Fonts on the web to give that little handwritten look. It's kind of a fun look. You can go do this messy layout underneath that creates some stuff. You can even see a few drawing glitches. We still have bugs to work out. These interactions are changing a lot. Click it, go down, do this. Because here, to make the messy effect work, I not only have to change the scale, I'm changing the z-index of the picture. So when I hover over this, I bring it to the top, and to get all this layering happening and with performance, it's good. In fact, you could try this in other browsers. It won't look quite the same. So we're pretty good there. That is sort of where we're at. So put it together, it's about interaction. That's what we want it to be. Go back there. And everything we've looked at, we've hit on the transparency, the border radius, box shadow, text shadow gradients, and web fonts, all sort of up front, the richer and deeper things, transforms, animations, transitions, multi-column, good, another session, filter effects, and Canvas, just a brief take here, go off and explore. It's a great thing to learn about. Want to make that last point. These features work identically in IE10 and Metro-style apps written in HTML. In fact, most of these, as I've said many times here, also work in other browsers with the browser-specific prefixes where required. A lot of related sessions. There's one tape that was last night. It's the Super Whirlwind, what's new in IE10, HTML5, JavaScript, CSS. There's a special session on, the one at 1 o'clock I've talked about with layout is the designing Metro apps. So if layout and text is your thing, that's a great session. There's features to take things offline and do it. There's a session on that. 50 performance tricks tomorrow, because all this stuff, if you want it interactive and to feel great, it's got to run fast. So Jason Weber, our performance guru in IE, is going to share his tricks on making things run fast. And then if you're willing to go to a session, maybe you're excited to go to a session, in C++ direct programming to Direct2D, there's a session, Cool Image Effects with Direct2D, and it's coding to that layer that we use to implement SVG filter effects, text shadow, and other shadows too. So there's that. A lot of documentation online. I encourage you to visit our test drive site. This demo's there, the Canvas pad demo's there, the little SVG things if you want to look at that, and much more, including an awful lot of fun performance demos. Read our blog. We try to keep up to date. In the next few weeks, we'll be doing deep dive blog posts on all the features new in IE10 and announced at this conference. All of these demos here, when I wrote them, I went right to the W3C specs. And that is really a statement, I think, about interoperability. And a lot of them were just blind. I go read the spec, add the thing to the controls on the right, and it works. It works in the Windows 8 platform. It works in other browsers as well. We have a session on how to draw on HTML5 Canvas. Actually, that's documentation online. If you want to go deep on Canvas, and then how to get your first Metro-style app going. That's an online document also. So with that, thank you. Please, I encourage you to use the device or go online some other way and give feedback. Feedback is great. Questions are super. We're responding to that. So please do so. And thank you for all coming this morning.